technology. I hate it.
All right, Jean, it's the floor is yours. Have at her.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much for having invited me to be your speaker. I'm sorry for the screw up. When Jeff asked me to make a presentation tonight, he said talk about what you are, and I figured, well, there's you know about some of the stories I've been involved with, but what is it that got me to where I am today? And the picture that you see, or that you were seeing at one time, that car accident, I'm going to get into that because it comes down to where we are today for myself, but also I want to get other people to understand exactly where they are in their own voyage on this planet. I got my, and what I want to talk about is the rights that we have and how many people don't realize that we have rights right now, but we don't know about them. And I'm hoping that after I finish explaining the car accident and everything else, you'll see where I'm going. I got my driver's license when I was 16 years old. But when I went for my first written exam, one of the question was, is driving a right or a privilege? And I said, well, God, it's got to be a right. This is in 1970. And I failed because I was told, no, driving is a privilege. So later on, I finally succeeded, but I took a driver's ed a year later in my high school. And naturally, in the driver's ed, they were showing us to wear a seatbelt. And I started wearing the seatbelt. I took on the government line that they must know what they're doing because they're giving us their studies. They must have information that we have no access to. So I took it for granted as 16 years old that wearing a seatbelt was safe. And as I grew older, 18, 19, I work on the farm with my dad. That is a picture of the farm. We have another farm about a mile down, and my dad would hop in the car with me. That was my car. And he said, why are you putting the seatbelt on? I said, well, it's safer wearing it than not wearing it. He says, yeah, we're only going down the road a mile. I said, well, and it became a habit. I would put it on as easily as breathing. Then one night, I opened my shop in 1974. And a year later, I was coming back from broomball practice, and I'd gone into Ottawa to get supplies for my business. And one of that was a case of muriatic acid. And as I stated, normally I'd pick up my goods and come back to the shop right away. But here I started playing broomball. So I went to broomball practice. And after that, I was in the shuffleboard league. So the case of acid stayed in the car for about 6 or 7 hours. And unbeknownst to me, that was a fume that built up. And when I got in my car, well, some vandalism had happened to several cars in the village. So I called the cops, and I wasn't drunk. I had had maybe a beer or two in over 3 hours. And he said, well, go home and call the insurance tomorrow. And I live about 3.5 miles away from town. Within 2 miles, angry as a hornet, when I got in my car, I was passed out within 2 miles. I woke up, the car had gone down into the ditch, and it was a flat ditch. I saw the telephone pole coming, and the telephone pole hit on the passenger side. And I saw the pole, and I said, I'm going to have an accident, and I passed out again. And the car, after hitting the telephone pole, the driver's side hit the side of the ditch, and the car stopped right there and flipped end to end on its roof and then pivoted. I had forgotten to wear my seatbelt that night because I was so angry. When the car hit, I hit the steering wheel, and then I went flying back in between the seat and the roof as the car was flipping over. And I ended up in the back seat of the car. I woke up in a pool of gasoline and muriatic acid. And my car was one of the first cars that had an electric fuel pump in the gas tank. I realized when I woke up that I had maybe seconds to live before the whole thing blew up. Luckily for me, the telephone pole had busted the battery, which is probably what saved my life. And if you want to go to the next picture, Cynthia, the picture, oh, just let me bring this up. That was picture 2. Go to picture 4. Yeah. Now go to picture 6. Picture 6, is that 6? Go to 12. Can you find 12? Oh. Yeah, that's 2. Anyway, as she finds the picture. So I woke up and that's it. I had to look around in the car upside down in dark with no fume. I mean, no air. It was gas fumes, acid fumes. And I was running my hands in broken glass. So I'm looking for a way out, and I found that hole. That's the only place I could crawl out of the car. So I pulled and pulled, and finally my head came out, and I took in a breath of fresh air. I was choking to death. And when I took in that breath of fresh air, I said, the head came out, the body's coming out. I weighed 125 pounds at that time. Today, I weigh 160. I could not crawl out of that hole today. Today, you would need the jaws of life to get me out. I crawled out of the car and I walked home a quarter mile with acid burns, broken ribs, and a collapsed lung. When I got home, they called, and I'm going to skip a lot of what the incidents happened. They called the ambulance and they took me to the hospital. And on my hospital bed, the doctors asked me if I was wearing my seatbelt. Everybody, they all asked me if I was wearing my seatbelt. And I had to think for a minute, and I realized, I said, no, I don't think I was. And I didn't know what the condition of the car was at that time. They said, well, if you were, you'd be dead. Now, I'm not going to put up an argument of what if a seatbelt can save lives and kill lives. But at that time, it was not a law. And when I got back in our car again, when I came out of the hospital, going home, I wasn't sure if I wanted to wear the seatbelt on. My little sister brought me to my car. And when I saw the car, I really didn't know if I wanted to wear the seatbelt again. In 1977, the law was passed to force us to wear seatbelts, along with compulsory metrification. And I took the decision not to wear it. And I realized that I was making a decision to either protect myself as I saw fit, or do I want to obey the law and put my life in the hands of the government? So that was basically what got me started in challenging laws, bad laws. Now, I still believe that at that point, I was not involved in politics yet. And I still believe that there must be some things wrong with the government on passing laws that can take away a person's free choice of how they want to best protect themselves. So going from there, I started looking for politics, political movements that I could attach my beliefs to. I looked at the conservatives, liberals, NDP, and finally somebody in 1980 said, I heard this woman on the radio, Sally Hayes, arguing about forest metrification. And it was affecting my business because I used to buy solder by the 25-pound roll for $100 a roll. And then when it converted to metric at 10 kilos, I was now buying 22 pounds for the same price. And this government law allowed corporations to take advantage of the consumer to change the standards of measurements that we were used to make us buy products that we had no idea how much we were paying for what we were getting. So the metric is basically what was the door to join a political party. And Sally Hayes is the one that introduced me. She's my political mom. And she got me reading libertarian materials, like The Law from Frederic Bastiat. I had already read Animal Farm in high school. Imagine that, in a French high school, we read Animal Farm. And I started learning more about rights of the individual, where our rights come from, Magna Carta. I knew a little bit of that in high school, but the political movement that I had now joined was all about freedom of the individual. And something that I had a belief in, but really didn't understand, was what is the first property right that we have as individuals? It's not a home, it's not land, it's your life. And when you understand that your life is your property and only you can decide how to dispose of what you can do with that life, well, that puts a lot of things in perspective. And when I realized that, I said, I became an activist at that point. And unfortunately, within the libertarian movement, there were a lot of philosophers, like in a lot of political parties, but very few activists. And the minute you write a letter about complaining about a point, you are an activist. Small a, but you're an activist. And anyone who decides to take an action, that's my belief, that's the way I see it. If anybody who decides to step up, take action against an issue, you're an activist. And that's not a bad thing. That's a very good thing, because very few people want to be activists. They're afraid. I don't know how many people call me up and they say, I'm not happy with this, and I've sent a letter here, but I refuse to put my name on because I'm afraid. Well, if you don't put your name to it, you might have as well not sent a letter at all. Because I've received letters with no names on, and I've let them know publicly. Whoever sends me something like that, you might as well not send anything at all, because I don't know how to respond to it. So anyway, with the issue of the seatbelt, I had taken the decision not to wear it. And I kept on driving, not wearing a seatbelt, until one day, 1988, I got a fine for not wearing a seatbelt. And I went to court, and the judge found me guilty of not wearing a seatbelt. So I refused to pay the fine, and my driver's license was suspended as of that time in 1989. I continued driving without a driver's license for the next 30 years. But in all of this, I was hoping to get a seatbelt fine and challenge the seatbelt law and the statistics, because I had found something in the statistics that I could put my finger in and rip it open. But time after time when I was stopped for, and it's not that I would drink and drive or be dangerous on the road. The police recognized me as not having a valid driver's license, and they pull me over. And every time they refused to give me the seatbelt fine. So I decided to challenge the privilege of driving in court on a charter challenge. And I put a constitutional challenge together on my own. I had some friends. I had met Dave Lindsay at that time, just beginning to know him. And I went to court with about 100 court cases where it referred to driving as a right. And it was not called driving. It was called operating your own private automobile. On a private action, you had a right. In 1940, the Supreme Court of Canada, in the 40s, the Supreme Court of Canada, and it's one of the court cases that I presented in court, stated that once someone can operate their own private automobile with all the care and the duty and the responsibility as to not hurt anybody else, you are given your permit free of charge. Now, the judge that I made the presentation in front of congratulated me on a lot of work and research that I had done, but he said, nowhere can I see where you have anything in the Highway Traffic Act where driving privilege is not included. He says, I see it there, and he says, I don't know when it was introduced, but he says, you don't have any proof to show that it was not always there. So that made me do more research, and I went to the law library in Ottawa, at the University of Ottawa, and I found the bill. I went to the very first Highway Traffic Act, 1897, something like that. There's only a few sheets. There's nothing about driving privileges. I went to 1960, nothing about driving privileges. I finally found it. And Cynthia, if you can put up the HTA 1, Highway Traffic Act 1, that picture. And it's the bill that modified the Highway Traffic Act on the year that, this is the bill, Bill 45, 1984. At the bottom of the page, you see the bottom right, driving a privilege. This is when driving as a privilege was introduced in the Highway Traffic Act, which means that prior to 1984, we had a right to be on the road. We had a right to operate our own private automobiles, and the government took it away from us by a simple amendment of the Highway Traffic Act. Prior to that, as I said, from the Supreme Court of Canada, when we passed the test, because it was a licensed right, but when they passed the test, you were given the permit free of charge. So a government cannot sell you a right, but they can sell you a privilege. And when they made that conversion, that's when they started selling us the permit. And then they modified the permit to make it a license, because there are commercial terms used, and when you use a commercial term, that's where the government can license it. So when they took away the operator's permit and made it a driver's license, that's where they could sell it. You had the chauffeur's license, which was for usage for a commercial venture. That is where the government could sell you the license, because it was for commercial activity of using a car, a truck, or whatever. So when I found it, I went back into court, but I didn't do I did not do a follow-up to my constitutional challenge, but I had now proof where driving privileges had been introduced in the Highway Traffic Act. If I would have had that in 97 when I did my charter challenge, I probably would have won, because that's the only thing they needed. Now, consider this. They took away our right by an amendment of the Highway Traffic Act. Yet the charter stipulates that rights can only be suspended by using either Section 33 of the charter, which suspends a right for 5 years, as Quebec has done for the Bill 101, or Section 1 that the courts can use, where they can suspend any right for as long as another court of equal or higher competency changes it. So my strong belief is that the Ontario government in 1984 illegally took our right to operate our private automobiles in an unconstitutional manner. Further to that, I was in court in 98 for another charge of driving on suspension, and I brought it out to the judge and the Crown, and they were dumb. They were just out of themselves. They didn't know what to say, and the Crown went as far as saying, "Well, Your Honor, I don't believe that Mr. Brisson is right, but," he said, "if he is right, the reason why it was done this way, it was for reasons of expediency." The man tried to walk on both sides of the fence, but I never brought it back up in a constitutional challenge. But I do think that I will be reopening my my challenge that I did in 97 and finish it off and have the courts explain to me how we can have a right stolen as they did in this fashion. Now I've gone to explaining about how we lost the right, because that's exactly what is where I came down to other events later on, is when I got involved in the tax issue. The for anyone who has read my book, you know about the GST and the PST that I refused to collect. And I was talking with a person who worked for the GST office at the time. And I was at a ball hockey game. I was getting ready to go on the ice, but the guys in the room were asking me questions. And I said, and I explained to them, I said, well, the government cannot force a business, an entrepreneur or business to collect money for them for no compensation. And my friend chirped up and he says, no. He says, we just took a corporation to court and we won against them. We are able to force them to collect taxes for us. And I said, no, there's a difference. I said, a corporation is a dead entity. It has no rights. The only way you can get the corporation to collect money for you is to take the people who are working inside the corporation, and they will do the work for the corporation, and the corporation will pay them to do the work for the corporation. But I said that is because it's a dead entity. You can pass any laws against a dead entity. There's no rights for a dead corporation. But I, as an entrepreneur, even if I have a business, because it's a sole proprietorship, I'm still the one attached to that corporation as a living, to that company as a living entity. And you cannot take away my right of being fairly compensated for the labor I had to give away. You know, you can't force me to give my labor away. So that's where slavery comes in. And he didn't argue, which just goes to show just how many rights we lose because we're not informed about what our rights are. And I've seen in the Highway Traffic Act and in the Municipal Act how municipalities have the same, are defined as the same thing as a person. And I find it very, I can understand the reason why they want to do it, but a corporation, even whether it's a municipality or the province or federal government, they're all dead. It is the people that are put in place to manage, you know, whether it's a government where we elect them or a corporation where they are given a position of an executive or a, anyway, the people who are put in corporations, they're paid to run that corporation, a dead entity. Same thing for governments. So it goes to show that if we don't know what our rights are, we don't have them. But when we know what our rights are, if we're ready to defend them, then we have our rights. One of the things that I had also put up and is the slavery. Cynthia, if you can bring up the slavery pictures. It is, it's actually historical. I had heard some people mention that when slavery was abolished in Canada, and they were referring to the 1800s. I have a, that would be, no, not further down. That's the bill. That's the bill itself that modified the Highway Traffic Act, 1984. But I just need the pictures before the Highway Traffic Act. It's the one on slavery. Anyway, slavery, this act was passed in the Niagara region. As you can see down below, it was done on an account of the events leading to the 1793 Act to limit and eventually abolish slavery in Upper Canada and the early experience of free blacks in Niagara. Canada, or Upper Canada at the time, is one of the first areas on this planet that we abolished slavery. I have all the items from the archives. One gentleman who knew what I was doing about taxes and my argument on slavery brought me the entire act. And it explains how blacks were allowed to become free. And what I'm telling you today is was supposed to be part of the second book that I've been writing. But with the recent issue with CRA, it's been bumped to a third book. I'm now writing a second book that is the account of why CRA took me to court, because they didn't like this book here. That's the reason why I was taken to court by CRA. They argued because I was not doing income tax returns for 30 years, that is the one of the only legal aspect of it. But what kicked it in was because I wrote that book. And the second book is going to explain the whole thing, the trial, the reason why CRA took me to court, the trial that preceded, and how I won. But the important thing in all of it is that we have found a secret procedure within Revenue Canada on how they go after certain people that they feel is a threat to them. They brand them as tax protesters, and we just don't have a chance to defend ourselves because of the procedure that Revenue Canada follows. And that's what the second book is going to be all about. And I will be going through this amount of documentation to make the second book, because in it I have the transcripts of the trial and the documents from CRA to make up the story. So everything is going to be documented. I won't be making anything up. I can't make anything up because, but when you read it, it'll be surprising how Revenue Canada is saying one thing, but is it doing an entirely different one, and has even lied in court that the process that I will be showing in the book exists. So I don't know. I think I have. I can take some questions if.
We'll have some more time, Jean, because we got started late. I mean, this is just a recording. It's not.
Okay.
We're not subject to CTV or CBC type of or CRTC guidelines. It's this is our own production, so we can make whatever changes we'd like. But if you'd like to take questions now, anyone have, just raise your hand. Anyone have a question? There's Bob.
Yeah, I want to go back to when you were talking about the Highway Traffic Act and the permits for license, that driving is a privilege. And that changed, you said, in 1984, I saw in the paper. So theoretically, can we not go back to legal nonconforming? I got my license in 1974.
Mhm. Well, that's just it. As I was saying earlier, when I went for my written test, I was 16 years old. I went for my written test, and you could only make four errors on the written test, and I had 5. And that 5th one was the fact that I had written down that the question was, is driving a right or a privilege? And I said it's a right, but it was a privilege. They have been, the system itself has brought about the belief that driving was a privilege in the early 50s or even before. And that's why it was in court, in Supreme Court of Canada in the 40s, where people were arguing, we have a right here. And the Supreme Court of Canada agreed that it was a right. It's a licensed right. You have to show that you can operate your own private automobile safely and responsibly. And then you are given the permit free of charge. That's stipulated in the Supreme Court of Canada's decision. But the bureaucracy continues to support the line. And that's something that I will be touching in my second book. Revenue Canada, we beat them. Dave Lindsay is the one who put up the formula on how to beat them with their own procedures. I never even got a chance to present my constitutional challenge on being able to have a political opinion because of my book. Never even got there. We beat them with our own procedure. But we didn't invent anything. Revenue Canada has been beaten on the social insurance number across Canada, but mostly out west. And I'm the first one to do it in Ottawa. But Revenue Canada refuses to change its process because it feels that not too many people know how to validate a SIN number in court. And as far as I know, they are continuing with the same process they use against me with anybody else, because those people are not aware of how invalid a social insurance number is if you don't follow the proper procedures. And in court, I indicated, well, it's a well-known fact. There are 9 million social insurance numbers more than there are people in Canada. And we mentioned that in court. Revenue Canada continues to do the same process, because if they change their process, they are admitting that they're wrong. So they're looking at the amount of people that have the knowledge of how to defend themselves in court. If I would have hired a lawyer at $25,000 or $30,000 to defend me, they didn't know it. Simply did not know it, because they follow the procedures that basically is taught to them by Revenue Canada. But you have tons of people who have studied, been given information from tax lawyers who are retired, judges who are retired. They're not afraid to turn around and say, well, okay, it's time, like there's nothing going to happen to their pension, whatever. So they can release some information. They release information. And, but the people who have the information, well, in my case, I don't think Revenue Canada is ever going to come after me again, because not only can I beat them on the SIN number again, I have a 1,000-page constitutional challenge ready to go after them on my political opinion through my book. So the driver's license shouldn't be a license, should be a permit, should go back to being a permit. But if people are not aware of it, and if you tell a cop this, they'll argue you. They don't know it. The judges in court don't know it. As I said, the JP that I was dealing with, he had no idea where the privilege of driving had come in. All he knew is that it's in the Highway Traffic Act. He has no further need to look. He has no need to look any further. But when you put the documents in front of them, then they have no choice. Our court, I have faith in our court system.
Jean, did you say that there was a Supreme Court of Canada ruling? I think it was 1940, was it?
In the 40s, yeah. I
Yeah.
have it in my archives. I just haven't gone looking for it. But Supreme Court of Canada has stipulated that a operator's permit was, once the individual proves that they can operate their not vehicle. I don't want to use vehicle because that is a commercial term. Their own private automobile or private truck or private car. Once they can demonstrate they can operate it safely with the duty and the care of being responsible to not injure anybody, they are given that permit free of charge because it is a right. Even if it's a license right, it is a right, and the government cannot sell rights.
So what has happened then is that the legislature of Ontario has ignored a previous Supreme Court of Canada ruling and passed whatever legislation they wanted. And I bring that up because the landowner down in Wellers Bay on the Bay of Quinte, there is a Supreme Court of Canada ruling in 1851, I think it was, 1507, where it said about the high water mark and the low water mark, and that the low water mark would be adhered to in the province of Ontario as long as it was not tidal waters, which would be like Hudson's Bay and James Bay. So all our waters are not tidal except for those two locations. And it was upheld again in the 1990s. However, the province of Ontario has ignored, since the 1850s, the Supreme Court of Canada ruling on the high water, low water mark, and has now put into the legislative authority that it will be the high water mark, or what they call seasonally inundated lands. So however high the water is on any particular year, if it goes up 10 feet one year and 15 feet the next year, that's where they're going to have the jurisdictional power to come in as M&R or the conservation authorities and do whatever they want. So one of the issues is that why are the legislative authorities ignoring the Supreme Court of Canada rulings? In my opinion, it would be, we just don't care and we'll make whatever law we want, even though the highest court of the land says otherwise. So you don't have, that does not give the people of Ontario or Canada any solid feeling that laws can be changed by the legislature at any time, regardless of what the Supreme Court says. I saw somebody else's hand pop up there. Was that, is it Debbie? I know it's not Debbie, but.
Well, yeah, it's Malcolm. It's my wife's Zoom. She uses it. I'm just using the system.
Yeah.
What I want to say, and Jean-Serge, excellent talk. I'm really glad that I took the opportunity to listen, and
Thank you.
I wish more people were listening, because there are a couple of things in the message. First of all, is that getting involved in reading the law isn't magic. You don't have to have a law degree. You just read. And by reading the legislation, you could see what these things that are happening. I work in Cheryl Gallant's office. I'm the guy that started to look into C-222 because we recognize, right, that there is no constitutional right to own private property in Canada. In Canada, your property rights are through the Expropriation Act, which seemed counterintuitive. And part of the reason why we were involved with that is that landowner in Wellers Bay, because I had the opportunity to talk to him. And in fact, I'm distantly related to him, right? So that's a long story. But so we could see what they're doing. And part of what the change we were putting in was to talk about climate variability, because the government now wants to use the term climate change as an emergency to start to take people's land. The most recent thing they did was they signed this treaty with the new president of the United States when he was still vice president, called Plan 2014 in Lake Ontario, where they write specifically in the document that they signed that they want to create 68,000 hectares of wetland. But they don't tell the property owners that they're going to take their land to create that wetland. This situation, that's why, I mean, they voted against C-222 because they're afraid of that, right? And this attack that's going on Cheryl lately, I think, is a pretty good example. When we saw them trot out the Minister of Environment, and there's challenges there, right? She's involved in some things that are rapidly taking away the rights of Canadians. And when you see what I see her attacking, I say, you know, we really have to work to inform our fellow citizens, right? And when I hear a guy like you, Jean-Serge, who's doing it right, I mean, that makes me feel really good, right? Because there's just so much of this stuff is going on. I mean, we're out there all the time. I mean, Cheryl's getting attacked because they don't like the fact that she's twisting their nose. They don't like that. And I just wish there was more of that. But unfortunately, the current government has shifted far more left under Trudeau than Martin or any of those guys were before. They've shifted the whole argument, and you know, it's not a good old goal. But here, I'll shut up and let other people talk, right? But it was a pleasure listening to you.
Thank you. But I'm going to add something to what you said and what Jeff said. The Supreme Court of Canada makes a decision. The legislature, the provincial legislature, turns around and says, screw you. We're going to pass what we want anyway. Because who's going to enforce it? Who's going to turn around and take down the politicians who are breaching an order from the Supreme Court of Canada? You have the OPP who refused to enforce orders from the provincial government in Caledonia. Who's going to be the one to bring down the hammer and say, you lose your job? We don't have recall. We could probably do it through the Governor General or Lieutenant Governor, who would say, hey, this is an order. You have to respect it. If you don't respect it, I can kick you out. I believe that's where the power rests when there's an order in court or order from a court, but the legislature refuses to enforce it. And if they don't use the instrument within the charter to invoke Section 33 to go around a court decision, then at that point, we have politicians who are breaching their oath of office. And this is where rectification has to happen, where if the premier or prime minister, they completely ignore the orders of the court and they do what they want to do anyway, you're in breach. This is where we need our Governor General to do its job. I believe in a constitutional monarchy because the monarchy, the Governor General and the Lieutenant Governor General are non-political. They're not affiliated to a political party in principle. So they should have the temerity to turn around and say, Ontario, you went against you went against the decision of the Supreme Court. Rectify it, or you're out of office. I'm going to call another election. Not out of office, but her power is to call an election. And this is where we need to educate our people in Canada, the voters, that we have one of the best government way of governing through our governor generals and the lieutenant governors. But those who don't have that information is the people in the job. They don't understand their own job. Look at Judy Payette, a complete airhead. And you know, the next person that is chosen, I'm not saying we should probably elect our Governor General, but they should go through a much more stringent scrutiny, that they know what they're doing. Like Johnson was probably one of the best educated ones, but I don't think he had the courage to turn around and say to the politicians, "You're not doing your job. I'm calling election."
We have another question there. Was Stefanos? Go ahead, Stefanos. And Timmy's next. Tim Mount's next. Can't hear you, Steph. No, still can't hear you.
How about now?
Yeah, barely. It's a little low.
All right, how about now?
Let's turn up the volume. Keep going.
I'm trying. How about now?
Yeah, that sounds good. Anybody else? Is that good for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
so
right.
This is more like a two-part question, Jean-Serge, and it ties in together. So you were speaking about the Slavery Act. So City of St. Catharines, this is something I'm about to take on now, has issued a warning to a person that if they do not clean the ice and snow on the sidewalk in front of their place, that they will be fined. So is this not slavery when you're having something like this forced upon you under the threat of punishment and no compensation?
Absolutely.
That is in older areas, that it was, instead of paying taxes, they
Well, no, somebody's talking, so I wasn't sure. I guess there's history there also, because I do know some people cut their lawn. There's a division between their lawn and the sidewalk, and they go and cut that when it's actually on city property. So I think there's it's like if you allow your neighbor to move their fence onto your property for so long, at some point in time, it becomes theirs. So there's if you've been taking care of a property for a while and then you decide not to, I think the city has a valid reason to say, well, you used to take care of it, you should continue taking care of it, unless you go through a legal process. But if they come along and tell anyone, you're going to take care of this piece of land because we deem it on your property, again, it's a difficult area. It would be different if they said, you know, that the baseball field across the road, you're going to go and clean it. That would definitely be an act of slavery. But a piece of property adjoining to your direct lawn or your direct property, that's a touchy one. And I think each case would be unique on exactly what the history is with that property and the property owner with the city.
Right. So the reason why I asked this question is this, and that what you're speaking of is adverse possession. So adverse possession in Canada requires to be 10 years. And the thing about adverse possession is it's non-permissive. So if, example, let's say I put a tent up in a little section of your own property. You do not do anything to evict me. After 10 years, that section now becomes mine. So this is where I'm coming into a city, which is public property, which we are paying taxes for a service to clean and maintain and everything else. And now all of a sudden I am told I must make sure I clean that city's piece of sidewalk, which is for public use, which is public property, and says I must keep it clean of snow and ice, or else I'm going to be penalized. So that's not my property. That's the public's property, which the municipality is being paid a tax for a service to keep that clean. So now that I'm being threatened that I will be fined for not keeping it clean, I do know the city of Hamilton attempted that and failed immediately. There was a lot of media attention to this, and they even said it themselves that they could not do it. And I'm just wondering, under slavery, that would be slavery, because it's not my property. It's public property. I'm paying taxes for this property to be cleaned. And now I'm going to be penalized for not cleaning it. That would be under a threat of punishment, which I'm not being compensated. So, you know, if the city wants to pay me some money to take care of their property, yes, I would agree 100% if I chose to take that on. If not, the question is, would that become slavery?
It absolutely is slavery if they're telling someone who never took care of the property before, you had to take care of that property. And it's all in the details of the case. And you know that better than I do, Stefanos. But yeah, I would say that if you never had to take care of that property before, and they come along and they deem that you had to take care of it, but it's not yours, then they don't have, I mean, they'll fail. But the problem is most people are not ready to go to court. most people are afraid of courts. They are intimidated by courts, and they will not fight. You're someone who can fight. And if more people had the knowledge like you do, like many have, like Donna's fought people in court. She, she just was determined and she won in court. In some, not all cases, but you won some things in court because you challenged it. I mean, everybody who is not intimidated, willing to inform themselves, as not Debbie, but you were saying earlier, it's information. It's all about information. And once you have information and you're confident with that information, that's the other thing. You might be given information, but if you're not confident with it, when you stand in front of the judge and you don't present it right, you will lose your argument. But if you present it right, and I trust the legal system, if you do it right, you will win. Donna next.
Unmute, Donna. Unmute. No, try it again, Donna. Nope. Try again. Still muted. Nope. Nope. There.
There we go.
Yep. Oh. You're unmuted. You're not muted, but we can't hear you.
All right, can you
There
hear
you
me
go.
now?
We got you now. Go ahead, Donna.
Okay, I think, yeah, it was the host muting me or something at the start that got me. I'm looking at my button here. Anyway, yeah, the province and the, this business with the roads, really, truly, I think what they're doing is their thought process, well, it's their roads. So if you want to drive on their roads, it's a privilege, but they forget the whole purpose of the province is to provide a service to its inhabitants, the same as the municipalities are. The whole reason for their being is to provide a service to us. They're failing that, and now they're starting to turn it around against us. So yeah, I think we got to really go back in the history to the very beginning of when this all began and start reminding them what their purpose is and how it came to be and how they have fallen off the track big time.
If you go back to the Magna Carta, the king was providing roads because the kingdom needed them. And today it is the king's highways and roads and highways, but it is for the usage of the people. They are in charge. Like the government has no money of its own. It cannot make any money of its own. It all comes from someone that has voted or can vote for the government. It's a corporation. We elect the executives. That's what they are. But the roads are for the users of the people. And you pay for the usage of it by either taxes on the gasoline, taxes through the plate, whatever, but the people are paying for the usage of the road. So for them to come along and say it's a privilege to use the roads, no, it's a necessity. It's a needed service. It's a needed infrastructure, because without it, no commerce, no livelihood, nothing can be done. So when they claim it's their roads, no, it's my road, it's your road, it's our roads. And we have to be able to use them in order to carry on commerce and trade and living. Until the day comes where we can fly, with our cars or whatever, then we won't need the roads. But at this point in time, it's the only mode of transportation that we have other than the rivers, and they don't go everywhere. So it's up to us. Again, it's up to us to educate the population.
Tim, you're up next.
Yep. So just a couple of things to Stefanos and to Jean-Serge. Diane was just telling me here that in Moncton, that up as late as the 80s, she knows for sure that in the city of Moncton, everybody cleaned the sidewalks, but there was a quid pro quo. They cleaned, the individual people cleaned the sidewalk, but there was no tax line for sidewalk cleaning in their taxes. And so by not being taxed, or by not having a charge on the taxes, the people were able to clean the sidewalks without it being slavery. But otherwise, I agree with you 100% on that, Jean-Serge and Stefanos, that if they're making people do stuff that they've never done before, and your example of the GST and HST, we aren't supposed to be collecting the taxes. That's up to the government. And with property where people, even if people have cut medians or stuff like that in a town or a city, that doesn't mean that you have to clean your sidewalks. It's your own free will whether you chose to do that or not. And so they can't start forcing you to do it when you felt it was neighborly or whatever to do it in the first place. The other thing I want to point out, I was checking on something else and I ran across the Australian Governor General, I believe it was in the 80s or 90s, that the Australian Governor General actually kicked the Prime Minister of Australia out of power. And our Governor General has the same powers that the Governor General of Australia has. Now, another thing relating to recall and that, I had a lengthy discussion with Liz early on this week, and looking for that particular thing. If there's an avenue for people to go after municipalities was what I was talking about, but if there is anything anywhere else. And in the Municipal Act, there actually are a couple of sections where the public, if they knew about them, would have a lot more power over municipal government. I haven't had time yet to really dig into them. Liz gave me the numbers. I can't remember them off the top of my head. I have them written down somewhere. But there are some sections where we can put direct pressure on. And the reason I bring that up is because of this whole gold belt issue that we had here with the city of Ottawa from, I think it was January 24th or 25th, with a joint committee meeting between ARAC and planning.
What is ARAC?
They said ARAC is agriculture and rural affairs. And they had put a gold belt around the city's green belt, and we caught wind of it at the end of January, and on February the 10th the city was going to vote on it and accept the gold belt, and there were a couple of other major issues with it, but we did a phoning and writing campaign from about the Saturday before to the Monday, or Monday and Tuesday, the 8th and 9th, and we got the city of Ottawa to back off on the gold belt. They completely withdrew it from the official plan, or from their proposed official plan. So going to what you were saying earlier, Jean-Serge, about we have to be aware of what's going on and be ready to act, not reactively, but we have to head them off at the pass. That's the only way we'll start making any headway, is if we can get out in front in some of these issues and put the pressure on them to back off. Anyway, that's something I'll bring up later in our meeting. Good old de-amalgamation.
And somebody here, it's listed as admin. I don't know they have a question.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, that's me. I was just wondering about the book that Jean was referring to that he had written. 1, 2, or 3, I think he said. He mentioned that he's doing a
That's the
third
first
book.
one.
Are these available for purchase, or are they private, or what? How could you access?
Send me an email. I sell them out of the shop. You have to send me an email. I can give it to you right now.
Okay.
At lowercase EP 523 at Freenet FREENET .Carleton CARLETON .ca.
Okay, can you just do it all over again?
Sure.
EP
Yeah.
5.
E as in echo, P as in Papa.
Oh,
523 EP. E as in
Yeah.
echo, P as in Papa. 523 at Freenet FREENET .Carleton CARLETON .ca. I've had that email since '93, so I don't want to give it up.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Very interesting.
It's only the first. The second book is going to be coming out in October to commemorate the anniversary of the 2 years that 2 years ago that I beat CRA in court. I would have
Okay.
I would have been able to finish it off earlier, but COVID prevented me from getting a lot of the paperwork, and I still have some paperwork transcripts to get from the courthouse. So.
Right.
Another question?
Thank you.
Can I just jump in for a sec, Jeff?
Okay, Jim, and then Stephanos is after Tim.
Jean-Serge, do you want me to post your email on the chat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Yeah.
All right, Steph, go ahead.
Yeah, so just to add to a little bit of what Tim said, yeah, if you want to voluntarily do something, yes, I not only in the municipality of St. Catharines, but Fort Erie also seems to be one of the worst offenders.
Maybe a little louder.
Okay, Fort Erie seems to be one of the worst offenders, not only the city of St. Catharines. In Fort Erie, many of you may have seen a video of a man's home being torn down with myself there and bylaw refusing to identify and being arrogant. But they have now went and started harassing the girlfriend of this man. And they threatened him during the summer that if he never cut the municipality's property adjacent to his girlfriend's home, that they were going to also demolish his girlfriend's home. So if this isn't slavery, I don't know what is. These kind of threats, it's a hell of a lot more than that. But these are just a couple of things that we're dealing with down in Niagara. They seem to be one of the worst offenders in the whole province of Ontario, possibly in all of Canada. But yeah, anything with a threat of punishment, I would concede is going to be slavery.
It's yeah, no, I've heard about the house being torn down. Again, people don't know their rights, and if you don't know what your rights are, you don't have them. Even in China, people have rights in China, and they've wanted to enforce them, but they have a government that refuses to give it to them. And if that day comes in Canada, I don't think it will. We have a a judiciary that works well. The problem is the enforcement of the decision of the judiciary by the people who are in charge. And when the people in charge aren't afraid of the people who vote for them, we have a problem, because the government should be afraid of its people. And in this case, it's not. And that's a problem. But we have a low information voting public who lots of time will, you just look at our prime minister, nice hair, he's cute, he must be smart. And that's judging a book by its cover. The most mundane way of choosing, or stupid way of choosing somebody to vote for, is what he looks like. And there's no substance to the man. So this is where and the socks, yeah. But this is where the landowners, and I'm gonna go into this. I wanted to close down close the meeting on saying this, but we don't have to stop it before I forget it. When I heard about the landowners, I wasn't sure how long they would last, because I saw many organizations come and go of people who grab, like, other than the libertarians, because the libertarian political movement is one thing, but politics can only do so much. Having a group like the landowners is unique. And this is where the strength comes in on being able to be activists. And when I first heard about the landowners, I wanted to know more about them. And correct me, but you had a series of chapters here and there that weren't really connected, but the Ontario landowners started in 2005. And I didn't get to one of your meetings until 2010, 2011. But what happened there is, when I found the landowners, I realized that you are way more what I need to be in than any other group I need to be in, because you, the landowners, are about property rights, private property rights. And I'm not talking about just, like I said in the beginning, not just a house or a piece of land, but our very lives. That's our private property, and no one has a right to interfere with it. So in saying all of this, I do believe that the landowners can be probably the strongest voice to carry that message more than any political party can. And that's why I joined. I mean, I'm with my family. When it comes to being an activist, I'm with my family, with the landowners.
Thank you for those words, John. It means a lot to everyone here, and to all the landowners that have been before and today, and all the landowners in the future. Is that Dave?
Yes.
All right, you have a question, Dave? Go ahead.